Listen, there's a part of you that's quietly dying, not from age or time passing, but because you keep going back to the same comfortable version of yourself. Safe, predictable, slowly fading. Every single morning, you wake up carrying the weight of who you used to be. That old version of you that always picks comfort over truth, that always finds a reason to put off growing, that stays small to stay safe. But Jung was crystal clear about this. Nobody reaches real consciousness without going through pain first. That's the cost of waking up. Jung called it the shadow, the parts of yourself you've shoved down into the unconscious, the parts you don't want to look at. But here's the thing, those rejected parts, they're running your life from behind the scenes. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that's the real tragedy. When someone becomes nothing more than a copy of themselves, when they get stuck in a safe loop, going through the motions, never actually growing. Real maturity is a choice, a painful one. It's choosing between the discomfort of growth and the slow death of staying the same. It's understanding that to live a life that actually matters, you have to let parts of yourself die. So forcing yourself to evolve isn't some motivational slogan. It's a sacred responsibility. The responsibility to peel away every layer of old skin, every outdated belief, every habit that keeps you trapped. The death of your old self isn't an ending. It's a rebirth, the emergence of who you actually are. In this video, you're going to hear a call rising from deep in your unconscious. It's time to face yourself head on. Time to force yourself to become the person you've been too scared to be, the strong, authentic version that can't go back. Don't forget to show your support by subscribing to this channel. Are you ready? Number 1. Recognizing the old self, the unconscious shadow controlling you. Carl Jung said it plainly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This isn't abstract philosophy. It's a brutal truth. Most of your decisions, your habits, your reactions, even the coincidences in your life, they're not random at all. They're coming from a part of you that you can't see. The shadow. That shadow isn't some demon. It's just the part of you that you rejected a long time ago. It's the wounded kid inside you that nobody listened to. It's the anger you pushed down so you could look calm and collected. It's the desires you labeled as shameful or wrong. It's the voice you silenced just to be loved, to be accepted, to fit in. Every time you hide what you really feel, every time you play it safe to avoid conflict, you give that shadow more power. And slowly, quietly, it becomes the real controller, operating in the dark. Jung believed most people don't actually live their lives. They just replay the unprocessed stuff from their unconscious, over and over. Look at your own life honestly. How many times have you fallen into the exact same type of relationship? Partners who are emotionally distant, who makes you feel like you're never quite enough. How many times have you started something full of excitement, only to quit the moment it got difficult? How many times have you promised yourself, this time I'll change, only to find yourself right back where you started a few weeks later? That's not a weakness. That's your shadow running the show through familiar patterns you can't see. Stop for a second and look deeply at yourself. Maybe you've changed on the surface, but have you actually moved into a new chapter? Or are you just rearranging the furniture in the same old room, calling it a transformation? Are you truly free? Or are you just locked in a slightly more comfortable version of the same cage? Everyone thinks they're moving forward, but sometimes we're just walking in circles in the same maze, and the old self still has the key. The old self is built not from who you really are, but from survival mechanisms. When you were a kid, you learned to rationalize pain just to get through it. You covered up your fear of being abandoned by becoming a people pleaser. You avoided failure by never really trying in the first place. Each piece of the old self formed like armor, protecting you from getting hurt, but also trapping you inside a glass cage. But that armor, over time, becomes a prison. The old self starts to fear anything that might crack it. Things like change, truth, or taking responsibility. It hates uncertainty, so it keeps you in the safe zone even as that zone slowly rots from the inside. It fears getting hurt, so it won't let you love deeply or commit fully. It fears failure, so it stops you from starting anything great. And it's the most dangerous enemy because it always sounds so reasonable. I just want to be safe. I'm just being practical. I'm just protecting myself. But Jung warned us, the place you're most afraid to go is exactly where the treasure you need is hiding. Think about this real example. A man in his 30s, stable job, Comfortable life, nothing lacking on the surface. But every time a promotion opportunity comes up, he feels like he's not ready. He tells himself, "I'm probably not cut out for leadership." He doesn't realize that deep in his unconscious mind, he's still the 5-year-old boy who got scolded by his father for thinking he was smart. That belief, "I'm not good enough," became part of the structure of his old self. Every time he avoids an opportunity, he's not refusing the job, he's refusing his own evolution. And that's how the shadow keeps its power, by making you think you're making rational, reasonable choices when you're really just staying small. The shadow doesn't only hide in your bad habits, it hides in things you think are good, too. Someone who's always nice, always enthusiastic, always there for others. They might not actually be compassionate. They might just be terrified of being disliked. Kindness born from fear isn't light. It's a subtle form of control. The shadow can wear a mask of morality when it knows that's the easiest way to survive undetected. To recognize your old self, start by watching yourself when nobody's looking. When someone criticizes you, how do you react? When others succeed, what do you really feel? When you're alone, where does your mind wander? Each reaction is a clue, because the shadow never disappears. It just gets illuminated. Jung believed the task of life isn't to destroy the darkness, it's to integrate it into the light of your consciousness. And this is where most people stumble. They want to eliminate the old self, erase the weakness, the fear, the negative emotions. But Jung pointed out that denial is exactly what makes the darkness stronger. The more you try to deny the dark part inside you, the more it possesses you in silence. It's like trying to hold a ball underwater. The harder you push it down, the more violently it bounces back. The only way forward is to learn to have a conversation with it. When you feel jealous, instead of feeling ashamed, ask yourself, what part of me feels abandoned right now? When you're angry, don't just force yourself to calm down. Ask what that anger is protecting inside you. When you're feeling lazy, listen to what's actually draining your energy. Every negative emotion is a message from the unconscious part of you, calling for your attention. Ignoring it is refusing your own truth. The old self doesn't just exist in your personal psychology. It exists in what Jung called the collective unconscious, the ancient behavioral patterns that all of humanity shares. Society glorifies stability, safety, and being average, and the collective unconscious makes you feel guilty for wanting to break through those limits. You're taught that ambition is arrogance, that being alone means you're a failure, that wanting to change is dangerous, and you believe it not because it's true, but because it's been imprinted in the collective psyche for generations. But Jung wrote, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That's the first step to seeing the shadow, because when you truly look, you'll see that the old self isn't some enemy. It's you, in a stage where you haven't learned to love yourself properly yet. And when you understand that, judgment fades, recognition takes its place. Recognizing the old self isn't comfortable. It's the process of dissecting your own soul, opening up every wound that is scarred over but never actually healed. But only by looking there do you see your true structure clearly. Which beliefs are inherited? Which fears were passed down? Which dreams actually belong to you? And then, as the light of recognition shines into that dark corner, you begin to feel a quiet shift. Old habits lose their appeal, excuses lose their weight, and a feeling, both terrifying and liberating, rises. That's the sign you're touching your true self, the part that's no longer controlled by the shadow, but is learning to live with it. Number 2, individuation, the true process of rebirth. Once you've dared to shine light into your darkness, the real journey has only just begun. Recognition is never enough on its own. Seeing the shadow doesn't change you if you still choose to stand in it. That's when Carl Jung introduces the next stage, individuation. The process he viewed as the ultimate goal of human psychological life. And it's not just development, it's a rebirth, the death of an old ego so that a true being can be born. Individuation isn't about becoming better, it's about becoming truer. It doesn't turn you into some perfect version. It turns you into yourself, the self that's never fully lived, because it's been buried under layers of conditions, expectations, and fears. Jung believed every person is born with a central self, the self, with a capital S, the deepest soul, both personal and eternal. But as we grow up, we get socialized, trimmed to fit into molds, and gradually, that self gets hidden behind all the roles we have to play. Eventually, you no longer know where the role ends and the real you begins. The process of individuation is the journey back to that central self. But to get there, you have to pass through what Jung called the desert of the soul, where the ego disintegrates. Jung compared it to the hero's journey in mythology. The one who leaves the safe village, enters the darkness, confronts the monster, dies, and returns with the treasure of awakening. That monster is the part of yourself you fear most. The treasure is your authentic self. In modern psychology, this is called ego death. But Jung spoke about it long before. He believed every psychological rebirth has to pass through a symbolic death. The old ego can't be upgraded or improved. It has to be dissolved. And that's never gentle. It's an inner earthquake where your old beliefs, old definitions, old relationships start to collapse. You lose direction. You don't know who you are anymore. It's a deep spiritual crisis, what mystics call the night of the soul. Think about Taylor Swift, a star who spent her whole life proving to the world that she was worthy. She said, "When you look in the mirror, you need to not tell yourself that you're not special, that you're not pretty, that you're not good enough." For years, she was cast into the mold of successful young woman, international star. And every milestone, every album, every award became a way to affirm, "I am this person. I have value." But one day, Taylor woke up and realized she was living for other people's eyes. The question arose, if I'm not the person they want, who am I really? That question wasn't comfortable. It was like crashing hard into the mirror she'd been clinging to for so long, the glass shattering, revealing every fragment of the false image she'd been wearing. But it was precisely in that chaos that Taylor first heard her true voice inside. "I have value not because of what others define, but because of me." That was the beginning of individuation. Individuation is the process of withdrawing every false identification. You no longer identify yourself with your career, your fame, or your social roles. You begin to see them as changeable shells, while the core remains solid and awake. You understand that who I am doesn't lie in what you have, but in your capacity to know yourself. Jung said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." And awakening isn't some magical moment. It's a long process of accepting your inner contradictions. You want safety, and you crave freedom. You want to be loved, and you fear being bound. You want to rise, and you fear failure. Individuation doesn't ask you to choose one side. It teaches you to harmonize the opposing poles. Jung believed you reach wholeness only when you dare to live with your own paradoxes. When you are both light and shadow, weak and strong, rational and instinctual. Think of a seed. To become a tree, it has to crack its shell. From the outside, that process looks like destruction. But from within, it's birth. Humans are the same. The old ego has to crack, has to shatter, so the true self can rise. And just like a seed never cracks on its own without the pressure of the soil, you'll never change if life doesn't push you to your limit. Jung said, "Man needs difficulties. They are necessary for health. Crises, losses, breakups, failures. These are all rituals of rebirth. But only those who see with Jung's eyes recognize it. Most people just fear the collapse instead of understanding that it's opening another door." In Jung's analytical therapy, he called this moment the confrontation with the true self. No longer blaming your parents, your circumstances, or society. You begin to take full responsibility for your life. And that's when the soul starts to mature. As the ego dissolves, the first thing you feel isn't freedom, it's emptiness. Many people stop here, thinking they're losing themselves. But in truth, you're only losing the false version. That emptiness is new ground where the true self is preparing to emerge. In this moment, Jung said, symbols become the language of the soul. Dreams, images, and strange emotions begin to appear. That's how the unconscious speaks to consciousness. When you learn to listen, you find wisdom beyond reason. That's why Jung viewed dream analysis not as fortune-telling, but as a dialogue with the soul. And then, as that dialogue deepens, you realize that awakening doesn't stop at understanding. Understanding alone isn't enough to transform you. Knowledge opens the door, but will you dare to step through? Number 3, forcing evolution. Psychological evolution is not a gentle river. After the soul is awakened, what it demands next isn't reflection, it's action. Disciplined action, painful action, intentional action. And this is the stage of forced evolution, where you no longer wait for change to happen. You force yourself to create it, day by day, action by action, choice by choice. Even when nothing is left in you, you want to do it anymore. Psychological evolution isn't a gentle river. It's a steep mountain where every step is a rebellion against your old instincts. If individuation helps you recognize your true self, then forcing evolution is the journey of living as that person, with discipline, with agency, and with no mercy toward your old patterns. Here, Jung doesn't speak of motivation. He speaks of will. Will is what rises above emotion. When you're tired, it still makes you step forward. When you're afraid, it forces you to look straight ahead. When you no longer believe in yourself, it keeps you on the path. Will doesn't care how you feel. It only cares who you're becoming. According to numerous studies, the brain can literally restructure itself through conscious behavior. When you act differently and repeat it long enough, you're not just changing habits, you're rewiring your own nervous system. That's the biological mechanism of forced evolution. Your brain always wants to conserve energy, so it prefers repeating the old patterns. To change, you have to resist the natural tendency of your own body. Each time you choose discipline over the old trajectory, you're sending a signal to your brain, I am no longer that old person. Forcing evolution isn't physical violence, it's deliberate mental violence. The cold discipline is necessary to break the outdated structures of the mind. Like forging steel, the fire doesn't burn the metal, it softens it for reshaping. Humans are the same. Pain doesn't destroy you. It makes you more flexible, more resolute, and truer. Consider Robert Downey Jr., a man who once drowned in addiction and lost everything. When asked what helped him change, he said, I had no choice but to become a new person. That's the essence of forced evolution. When the pain of staying still becomes greater than the fear of change, you're forced to step forward. But you don't need to wait until you hit rock bottom to awaken. You can proactively create that pressure for yourself, consciously, by setting higher standards each day. You might be at that crossroads right now, where you know you have to change, but you're still lingering between fear and desire. Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And that's exactly why so many people never evolve. They accept living in the comfortable loop, stable job, tolerable relationship, a life that's just sufficient. But their souls are suffocating, because the soul doesn't need convenience, it needs purpose. And purpose is only awakened when you push yourself beyond your limits. Forcing evolution isn't self-torture, it's self-birthing. It doesn't demand you be perfect. It'd be great if you could be honest about your direction. Each time you discipline yourself, you're telling the universe, I'm ready. And the universe always responds by sending more challenges, not to punish you, but to reinforce the new form taking shape within you. Jung viewed this process as a form of ego sacrifice because the unconscious always wants to pull you back to the safe zone. You'll hear familiar whispers in your head. Don't push too hard. Rest today. It's not so bad. Why change? That's the voice of your old self. The one that once protected you but is now your barrier. Forcing evolution means refusing to negotiate with that voice, no matter how reasonable it sounds. Because if you keep listening to it, you'll never hear the call of your soul. Imagine within you, there are two wolves. One represents evolution, courage, discipline, action. The other represents stagnation, fear, comfort, self-pity. Which one wins? Jung would say, the one you feed each day, and you feed it with action. Every morning you wake up, you can choose to let the weak wolf feast on procrastination, laziness, or complaining. Or you can let the strong wolf grow by facing reality, acting, and taking responsibility. All evolution is the result of small but consistent choices. One of the most insidious traps of modern psychology is self-acceptance done wrong. Many people use the excuse, I just want to be myself, to avoid discipline and responsibility. But Jung would disagree. He believed that oneself is not something you declare, it's something you forge, something you become. If you accept a version of yourself that you know is weak, fearful, and incomplete, that's not self-love. That's self-betrayal. Forcing evolution is the mature act of self-love. Love to the point where you won't tolerate your own smallness. Like a father teaching his child to walk, he doesn't carry the child forever. He lets them fall, because he knows falling is the only way they'll learn to stand firm. The universe is the same. It doesn't give you an easy life because it respects the potential in you. It forces you to collide with reality so you awaken. Forcing evolution ultimately isn't a war against yourself. It's a war to save yourself. The true part is trapped in comfort. It's discipline as a spiritual ritual. Each disciplined action is an affirmation to the universe that you're serious about your destiny. And when you look back after months or years, you'll see that the new person didn't appear by magic. They were forged hour by hour, choice by choice, each time you forced yourself forward. That's how the soul matures, not in peace, but in pressure great enough to dissolve the old ego. Jung wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. And it's precisely in the act of forcing yourself to evolve that you do it, not just escaping the problem, but outgrowing the person who created it." Number 4. The new person must betray the old version. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he never said the journey would be gentle. To become your true self, you have to dare to betray everything that once made you loved, praised, and accepted. The betrayal here isn't an impulsive rebellion. It's a courageous act of consciousness. The old self was once your refuge, where you were safe, familiar. It might have helped you survive, but now it's preventing you from truly living. To grow, you have to say no to the very things that once defined you. And that's one of the deepest mental pains there is, betraying the very image you once believed was me. Jung believed every person has to go through an inner divorce, where the true soul decides to leave the rotten old ego behind. It's the moment you realize, I no longer want to live like this. Not because you hate your past, but because you know you can't carry it on the journey ahead. And like any separation, it comes with grief. You have to endure the sorrow of losing you of yesterday. Think of someone who lived for years in a mold others imposed, maybe a compliant employee, or a friend who always listens, never speaks up. Everyone gets used to that image. And gradually, they believe they have to be that way to be loved, to be recognized. But one day, they realize that obedience is no longer a virtue, it's a chain. They start saying no to things that aren't true to them anymore, refusing requests, relationships, and roles they once tried so hard to maintain. And when they do, others start to get uncomfortable. You've changed. You're too selfish now. You're not yourself anymore. But in truth, that's the first time they're truly themselves. It's not rebellion. It's the courageous act of someone daring to betray the old version to be loyal to their true soul. Betraying the old version means accepting the loss of your place in others' hearts. Because your old self doesn't just exist in your mind, it exists in the memories of those around you. When you change, they get unsettled. They'll tell you, you're not yourself anymore. But in reality, that's when you're most yourself. Jung said, when an individual does not become conscious of their inner contradictions, the world acts out the conflict and is torn in opposite halves. The difficulty of this journey doesn't lie in not knowing what you need. The difficulty lies in knowing it all too well, but still clinging to the old because you fear losing what's familiar. Like a bird that's been in a cage too long, even with the door open, it doesn't fly, because freedom sounds appealing, but it demands what the ego hates most: risk. Like losing a loved one, you'll go through all the stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and only then, acceptance. But remember, the death of the ego isn't a tragedy. It's a sacred rite of passage. It's the door you must pass through to touch what Jung called self-realization, true spiritual freedom. Betraying the old version also means ending relationships built on your old image. When you change, some people will leave, not because you're wrong, but because you no longer fit with them. They're like old clothes that don't fit anymore. They represent the old chapters of your life. Jung said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. If others aren't ready to evolve with you, their departure isn't a loss, it's a sign you've matured. This betrayal is also symbolic. You betray the limiting beliefs that once made you small. You betray the humble to the point of inferiority version. You betray the well-behaved to the point of losing your voice version. You betray the always choosing peace over truth version. It's the necessary betrayal for rebirth. In Jung's view, this betrayal is a reconciliation between shadow and light. Because the part you're betraying isn't entirely bad. It was once your light in an old phase, but that light has dimmed now. Holding onto it out of habit is a form of blind loyalty. And Jung called that loyalty the greatest betrayal of the soul. For Jung, this is the crux. Loyalty to the soul always demands betrayal of the ego. And betraying the ego is the bravest act a human can do, Because you're not just losing a part of yourself, you're stepping into the void where all temporary definitions dissolve. There, you're no longer a better version. You're simply a truer version. Jung called this moment a return to the self. It's when you no longer need to prove yourself. You no longer need to strain to become someone. You only need to be present with absolute honesty. But to get here, you have to dare to stab the old image you once worshipped. You have to dare to tear down the walls built from praise, recognition, and the habit of being loved. Betraying the old version isn't the act of someone cold-hearted. It's the act of someone who understands. True loyalty isn't to the past. It's to potential. You can respect the person you once were. You can be grateful they helped you survive. But you cannot let them steer your path any longer. Because if you don't betray the old version, you'll betray your own future. And that's the most painful betrayal of all. Number 5. Maturity is war, a battle without days off. But that's only the beginning of a longer war. The war to sustain the new person you've labored to birth. Jung implied something deeper. Consciousness doesn't sustain itself forever. It has to be nurtured daily. And this is where most people stumble hardest. After changing, they think they're done. But the truth is, maturity isn't a destination. It's a battlefield without days off. Because every morning you wake up, the old self is still there. Not dead, just dormant. It waits for you to weaken. It waits for you to get tired. It waits for you to loosen your discipline just once. And then it rises again. Jung saw this as the eternal inner conflict between ego and self, between the person you're trying to become and the person you once were. These two forces never disappear. They only pull and tug, hour by hour, minute by minute. And if you don't actively fight, you'll be dragged back without even realizing it. If betraying the old self is the first revolution, then sustaining the new person is the protracted war. Like a soldier tending the fire in a night storm, you have to guard your own awareness from the undercurrents of habit, because the unconscious has a pull as strong as gravity. It draws you back to the old orbit, old reflexes, old programming, old roles. If you slack off, you slide back unnoticed. Jung called it regression into the shadow. Look back at yourself honestly. How many times have you changed, only to return to the old trajectory? You start exercising, then quit after 2 weeks. You promise to be honest with yourself, then cover it up with rationalizations. You declare you'll live differently, but one tiring day has you curling up in old habits again. Not because you're weak, but because you forgot that maturity doesn't sustain itself. It needs reinforcement every day through choice. Jung believed the human soul is like precious metal in the alchemical process. It has to be melted down, refuged many times to take its final shape. He called this the alchemy of individuation, meaning you can't reach wholeness through insight or inspiration alone. You have to forge it. And forging, as every craftsman knows, is a repetitive action, sometimes boring, sometimes painful. But if you persist, what forms isn't just skill, it's essence. That's why Jung said, a mature person can live with conflict without being destroyed by it. Because conflict isn't a sign of failure. It's evidence you're still growing. The person with no contradictions has stopped growing. So when you feel that inner battle, between wanting to rest and having to continue, between fear and commitment, don't think you're on the wrong path. On the contrary, that very conflict is the pulse of the maturation process. In everyday life, you can see this more clearly than ever. A young mother trying to balance work and children, feeling guilty for always being not enough. A middle-aged man who realizes the career he pursued for 20 years no longer holds meaning, but he's terrified to change. A student facing disorientation after leaving the family nest, wanting freedom but fearing getting lost. They're all in the same place, on the battlefield of maturity, and nobody wins on the first day. Maturity is a war without days off, because each new layer of awareness opens a deeper layer of challenge. You learn discipline, and life demands you learn patience. You learn confidence, and life tests you with solitude. You learn honesty, and life sends situations forcing you to choose between truth and comfort. This war has no rewards beyond yourself, a self that's increasingly solid, awake, and autonomous. And perhaps that's the profound meaning in Jung's philosophy. Maturity isn't seeking absolute peace, it's learning to keep your balance in the middle of war. When you understand that the contradictions within you aren't enemies but engines of evolution, you begin to see life differently. You don't run from the storm, you learn to walk in the rain. Maturity doesn't bring stability, It brings the strength to endure instability. Not muscular strength, but mental strength forged from 1,000 refusals of the easy path, 1,000 choices of truth, 1,000 times holding firm when nobody's watching. So if you feel tired, if you're battling yourself every day, don't think you're losing. Maybe you're exactly where Jung was talking about, right in the middle of the battlefield where the human soul is forged into gold. Maturity is war, and this war has no days off. But each time you dare to step forward amid the smoke and doubt, you're proving that your consciousness will prevail. The path forward, once the door is open, what remains isn't grand declarations, it's the small motions you make each day. The most practical thing? Start with a simple standard. Do what needs doing, on time, even without the spark of motivation. Wake up 15 minutes earlier to sit still and ask yourself one question. What one thing, if I did it today, would make me respect myself more? Then complete it before you touch your phone. During the day, apply an honest filter to every choice. Does this nourish the person I'm becoming, or does it feed the old one? At night, close the day with 3 short lines. Which promise I kept, where I faltered, and what specific action tomorrow will correct it. You don't need to wait for a feeling of readiness. The feeling comes after you start. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Just don't betray your own standards when nobody's watching. The path will still be rough, but small disciplined steps will assemble into a directed life. Keep going like that, quietly yet surely, and you'll find yourself on the other side of the life you've always desired. And if you've come this far, maybe there's a part of you that no longer wants to go back. Hold that flame. Keep moving forward, because you're on your way to becoming yourself. Thank you for staying with me to the end. Hit the subscribe button and share this video.